Hi, my name is Brian Jacobson, Director of Advancement and Alumni Relations at Trinity Bible College in Ellendale, North Dakota. Recently, my wife Dee Dee and I had the opportunity to spend the morning with Mark and Jessica Nelsen. Mark and Jessica are Trinity Bible College alumni, and they're also church planters in a little town called Cascade, Montana. What ensues is a video interview of our conversation with them, and it starts with me asking Mark and Jessica just to tell us a little bit about themselves and unfolds into their remarkable story and journey. I trust this is a blessing to you. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Well, we met at Trinity in 2000 and something, 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. I got married right after I graduated, and several years after she had graduated, and
Nice.
and we're youth pastors in Kansas for a couple of years, and music pastors in Minnesota for 5.5 years, 6 years, something like that. And God called us to come start this church here in Cascade, and so we said okay. We didn't really know what we were getting into. Had never even really looked at church planning before, and we're just obedient and followed where God led. We were too ignorant to know that you shouldn't start a church in a town this small, and that opening things like a coffee shop doesn't actually make you money. It just eats away all your time. But God used all those things as He opened the doors, and has just been faithful to allow a lot of really neat opportunities in ministry.
Jessica, your story.
Oh, man. Well, Trinity actually has a really big place in my heart because my dad was a non-traditional student, so I actually spent 1st through 4th grade in Ellendale Elementary School.
Wow.
As my dad was pursuing his Bible degree there. Then he went on to pastor a small church, and then the Lord led me to Trinity. As he said, I graduated before him. I graduated in 2002 from Trinity. And then after about 9 months in ministry, I was working underneath my dad. The Lord moved him on and moved me back to Trinity. And I spent 2 years there then as the RD in Davidson Hall with the freshman girls. And then also worked in the library with Phyllis, and also adjunct faculty in the music department. So, and we got reacquainted at that point, and then...
She was my teacher.
Yeah, I don't like to tell that part. The Lord has a way of humbling us and doing things that we told Him we would never do. And here we are.
So what's the story of Canyon Life Church in Cascade, Montana?
And I guess it's a story of obedience. I mentioned I was a music pastor in the Minneapolis area, and I did not enjoy preaching at that point. Some things that didn't go well, and in my first years of ministry, I was happy if I never preached again. And I was preaching on a Sunday morning because our pastor was gone at the church it was just south of St. Paul in a suburb, and I felt like God said, "You're going to pastor a church," and I'm like, "Oh, I thought we already had this conversation, God. I thought I had you clear on this," but He was confused, and so we started having conversations, God and I, and then Jessica and I, and the pastor and I, and he said, "Yeah, I could really see you guys pastoring a church in a small town somewhere." And so we just kind of said, "All right, God, we'll just leave that door open." It was just like 3 days after that, out of the blue, I get a text from my brother who was on staff at a church in Great Falls where we grew up at the time, and he's like, Cascade would be a great place to plant a church. And it was just so random. We're like, okay, it feels like God is saying something here, so we just started praying about it. And and a lot of things, God confirmed it a lot of ways along the way, but probably the coolest way was one day I was on the Realtor's website for Cascade here, and just kind of checking out the community. I was fairly familiar with Cascade, but just trying to find out as more information as I could before we, started actually packing the truck. And I had to make an account on the Realtor's website, and that was back in the day when you had to like retype the word, that's all jumbled, the CAPTCHA thing, and the word perfectly spelled out, clear as day, no distortion in it at all. That was the word revivals. And I about fell out of my chair when I saw it, and because God said, "This is why you're going there." And so we met for 2 years. Wow. in the community hall in the gymnasium where we set up and tore down every Sunday, and we were looking for a more permanent place, and we looked at land to build on, we looked at places to rent, we looked at some other buildings in town that really needed some work to them that we could make work, and all those doors closed. I think there was probably almost 10 different options we looked at, and we're like, we're done with this temporary thing. We need a permanent home, as the church was just starting to grow and things, and God opened the door for this facility. And so we purchased this in 2015, which at the time was the Sportsman's Bar. And we purchased it. They wanted to sell it as a turnkey bar, and so pool table was right here, and this was operational bar. There was all sorts of liquor right behind us when we came looking at. That was the beer cooler, Keno machines. The whole 9 yards. And it was a rough and tumble place. Bullet holes in the ceiling right here. The upstairs right above us at one point was used as a brothel, illegal gambling. We broke up a marijuana grow room in the basement when we were, you name it, it happened here. And God decided it was time for some redemption for this place. And so we got to be part of that story, which, has all sort of dynamics on the community. But it's been a fun ride. Definitely not easy, but it's been fun.
So, Jessica, you mentioned earlier as we were talking, you have 3 children?
Yeah.
And what are their ages?
Anna's our oldest. She's 12. And our middle daughter is Joelle. She is going to be 9 here pretty soon. And then we have a 2-year-old son. He was our little surprise.
So what's that journey been like as a mom of 3 kids, three kids that are under the age of teenagers, and this journey here for you as a mom? You said something about homeschooling too.
Yeah.
So what's that been like?
It's been interesting for sure, because one of the things we always try to tell our kids is that when we are following a call from the Lord, any kind of ministry growth that happens or transformation that happens in people's lives, they receive spiritual credit for as well. It's something I learned from actually reading a John Bevere book at one time, because I think our kids, there are some sacrifices that they have to make following the call of God on our lives, and for them to understand that they actually get to receive reward of some of the fruit that happens. So helping them to kind of navigate that. Our oldest daughter is completely extroverted, and so this whole thing was like right up her alley. She still is. Any stranger she can meet is like, please, that's what she wants to do. Our middle daughter was 2 when we first moved here, and she is not extroverted at all, very, very introverted. And so truthfully, it meant that Sunday mornings, because I was behind the keyboard and we were the worship team, because that's how it is when you first start, I was standing up playing keyboard with a baby on my hip and just kind of balancing her there because she didn't feel comfortable going to anybody else. So, it has its ups and downs, but they have been so resilient and have been an incredible part of what God's doing here. So,
Mark, you said something, or maybe it was you, Jessica, it was something about when you went to the Church Multiplication Network, Church Planters boot camp,
Yep.
and that you didn't quite fit in. This, a real true, very rural model didn't quite fit in there. Tell us a little bit more about why you didn't quite feel like it fit in. That might not be the right language, but just that journey there.
We went to a church planting boot camp through CMN in just right before we launched, so that was like January of 2013.
And how long was your launch from the time you moved here to the point you launched?
So we moved here at the very beginning, January of 2013. We started doing monthly services in May of 2013, and then we did our full launch in September 2013.
We actually decided not to go the route of U.S. missions. You know, of course, you have that option as church planters where you go through the U.S. missions program and raise your own support through that way, and you can. Just like very similar to a world missions model where you go itinerate and earn your budget. And we just really felt a strong leading from the Lord that He had called us to do it. We wanted to get on the ground as soon as possible. And it was just a conviction that we had. So we had talked to the district superintendent here, and he said, we don't have any necessarily support for you monthly. However, if you want to travel around to different churches and kind of share the vision of what God's laid on your heart, then if those individual churches would like to support you on a monthly basis, then they would have the option to do that. And so that's what we actually did from January to May. We itinerated to those different churches and gained some support. Actually, the district, you know, it's tough for churches to do that, but we had several that were very supportive of us. And then the monthly services in May, weekly in September.
And we really felt like God was going to take care of that budget for us, which He did. So we were able to just step out in faith, and it was interesting as we did that. God just was so faithful. In fact, like the week before we moved from Minnesota here, we got a phone call from somebody we didn't know that just said, "Heard about what you guys are doing. We love it. We feel like we're supposed to support you," and sent us a very large check. And it was just like God's confirmation of, you guys are on the right track. And so we, end of January 2013, we went down to Mesa, Florida for the
Arizona.
there's
Mesa,
not a Mesa
Arizona.
in Florida. Okay, we went to Mesa, Arizona. For the Church Multiplication Network boot camp. There were some great tools that they taught there, but at that point their model was really a lot more focused on, you take a team of at least 50 people from another church and you go and plant in another community. And a lot of it was really in a more of a city context, like a suburban. Yeah.
Sure.
And a lot of them were like, oh yeah, we were at our home church in this suburb, but now we're going to be in this suburb. And so when the two of us show up and say, we don't really have a team, and we're going to a rural town of 700 people, they're just kind of like, oh, okay, well, you can listen in, and that's maybe a little over dramatized. They were great, but it was really hard to kind of marry the two at that point, just because I think rural church planting wasn't on a lot of people's radar yet. I think it's changed in the last 7 years, but
I think the general model was to begin with an event, some kind of an event that would make yourself known to the area. And then when you did launch, you would have the team in place where you would have children's ministry and youth ministry and women's ministry and, all of the different programs already built in. And we just really had a sense from the Lord, because it was just the two of us, and understanding that we are not superhuman and cannot fulfill all of those roles, along with having a family and getting established. We just felt like the Lord really said, do whatever I put in front of you right now. And if it doesn't look like you have all of the programs, that doesn't matter. I've actually called you just to love on a community. Right. So just be me to the community, and I will show you and provide for you what you need to step into those programs or whatever when the
good.
time's right.
Right, when there's a need and even other people who can partner with you. So really, from day one, it's been more relationally driven than program driven.
Okay.
And we hope it always stays that way. That's our desire, to really just make sure it's always personal and loving people well.
Cascade is a community of about 700, you said?
Yeah, it's 700 in the town itself, and then a lot of different pockets of people. We probably have about 4,000 in a 20-mile radius.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the estimate number of those who are unchurched or who don't have any sort of Christian experience going on in their lives?
I believe Cascade County is fairly high. I think it's the 70 to 80% unchurched.
Unchurched?
Yeah.
70 to 80%
Yeah, I think
unchurched
that's-
in north central Montana?
I'd have to look that
Yeah.
up. But
Okay. Still pretty.
Yeah, it's fairly high.
Even if it were 50% or 60%, it would seem to be high to me.
Yeah.
It seems like it's becoming just more apathetic. What we have discovered, even for people around this area, you get a lot of ranchers and people who are there, especially certain seasons of life when there's a lot of work going on. And if church has never been a priority, it is not going to. It's not. I don't know how to say that. Short of an encounter with the Lord, I don't know that it's going to become something that they do.
What reason do they have to begin attending church now if they haven't done it regularly for so many years because of their...
Right.
So,
I think relationship is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There have been people that have started coming to church because they walked into the homestead, the little cafe, and they formed relationships with the ladies here. We've also had people who just come in here who don't even feel comfortable going to church. We've had local bar owners come in here and ask for prayer. Not from Mark and I, but from the ladies working here.
wow.
Just because they know it's a safe place.
Yeah.
And so I think when people start to actually attend church, probably one of two things happen. They've had a relational encounter with the Lord himself, or they have had a relational encounter with someone who is carrying Christ within the community.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so I mentioned we actually started a coffee shop when we first came, which was not this. It was a couple blocks up in a small, which is now a fly shop 2 blocks up that way, and we only had the lease on that building for about a year. We thought it'd be a good way to make money, which it was not. But it was an incredible way to get to know the community, because even before we launched the church, people knew who we were as business owners and serving them food and coffee, and we were able to build those relationships there first, which turned out to be a great strategy. I don't know that it was intentional on our part, but wish I could take credit for it, but it was just God led us to that.
We're standing, you're sitting in the old bar. We can see behind you the old bar and what would appear to be some tables, cafe-like. Tell us about, I'm going to pan a little bit here with the camera while you tell us what you did in here, what is in here, and we got some merchandise over here too, and let's start here at the bar.
Well, this is the original bar. I don't know how old it is, but this was the bar that was in here, and we decided just to keep it because it's cool, for number one. But and even just as a reminder that God redeems things, and just to think about all the things that have happened in here, and so we're open in here for our restaurant for breakfast and lunch 5 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday. And we really train our employees that it's ministry. It's not just a job. So like Jessica said, they do get opportunities to pray with people, and they pray over all the food that comes out. They pray with people traveling. We just had a couple came in last week who were on their way back. They were snowbirds, and they were on their way back up north. And our manager had prayed with them as they were headed down to Arizona in November, and they were freaked out about the roads. And they came in and they were just so happy and said, when we drove over that pass, we couldn't even tell it was snowing. And, I mean, just little things like that. And, we've seen people healed of things in here when we prayed for them. And then that all the merchandise is just a way for locals to be a part of this too. This is pretty much all local handmade merchandise.
Sell it on consignment kind of thing?
We do consignment with
Okay.
people. And so it's a great way to include people too. And I guess our heart is just to, have a place that's for the community, that's not a bar, that this is actually the only sit-down restaurant between Helena and Great Falls. It's not a bar. So just to provide that family atmosphere, we can't do it 24/7, but we can do it what we can do. And so we see it as ministry. It really doesn't make that much money. The idea is, someday it will, and then it can. We've actually structured it so it can. The funds that are made here can go back to support the church tax-free, and they're completely separate entities. But it's a way for us to love our community, to reach out, to be known as not just a church in the corner,
Yeah. I assume Canyon Life you're all on Assemblies of God Church.
Yes.
So are you a district church?
We're a general council church.
General council church.
Yeah.
So what's your attendance Sunday morning?
It's really actually kind of grown a lot in the last few months. I'd say since the beginning of the year, our average attendance is probably about 70.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And there was no Assemblies of God work here in Cascade?
Never.
Ever?
Never. Yeah.
There was some small groups that had met here. There were some other. I don't know that there was ever a Pentecostal church. There was more of an evangelical or Bible church that met here years ago in the same building that we started in. So,
what would you say to Trinity Bible College students now? I mean, I'm sure you're aware that Trinity has. It's always had sort of a rural nexus,
Right.
obviously, in its ministry focus, just by virtue of the fact that where we're at in Allendale, North Dakota, and it's in the original foundation of it at Lakewood Park Bible Camp, Lakewood Park Bible Institute in 1948 when it was started. And now we have a graduate school with a master's in rural ministry.
Yeah.
So just the emphasis on reaching rural America within Trinity is even heightened even more.
Yeah.
So what would you say to Trinity students who are feeling this sense in their heart that they want to go back to rural, or they feel called to rural? And what would you communicate to them?
I'd say embrace that. And, I did not love rural when I first came to Ellendale. It took a while to grow on me. I hated it at first. I hated the small town.
But you were from Great Falls.
From Great Falls, so a town of more like 60 to 70,000.
Okay.
So to me, jumping down to a town of a couple thousand was difficult, and maybe it was just because it was in North Dakota. But you can take that off, strike that from the record if you need to. But I'd say embrace that. God formed that in my heart when we were at Trinity, and then we ended up in a rural town in Kansas, and then we ended up in a suburb in Minnesota, and it was a good time. The church we were at, we loved. It was a great season of ministry, but there was something in both of our hearts at that point that said we need to get back to rural. There's just something about it, and now I love it. I would not move. You couldn't talk me into it. I love the atmosphere of rural. I love being a rural pastor because you get the opportunity to be a pastor when you go to the post office and the grocery store, and because there's just this microcosm of people who are all living life together, and everybody knows each other, and a lot of people don't like that about small town. I love it. And because you end up getting to minister to people in real life and in real time.
One of the things that comes to my mind too about rural is we actually had the opportunity to go to Israel in January, and one of the things that struck us, which you find it actually to be quite common in the Bible as you read through, like Jesus doesn't call these big, powerful people or super talented, but usually it's the one that nobody expects, right? Or you see the story of Gideon, he's got this army of 30,000. No, we'll use 300.
Right.
So then that way, God will receive the glory, and there's no way you can say, this was us.
He's definitely the God of the underdog.
Yeah, for sure. And so we saw that again painted over and over again as we walked, and even where Jesus did his ministry, it wasn't in the big towns, it was in the small, out of the way places.
Galilee.
Where he walked with people. And just had this sense that God, not only is God not done with rural, but I have this sense that with what God's doing in the earth, with the big, I really believe that we are on the verge of an incredible move of God. And I feel like the rural places, he gave us that word revivals. I believe those rural places, those small out of the way places that nobody would expect those are going to be the, not that God can't use anything, but those are going to be the places I believe where God's just going to show up and do incredible things.
Transition just a little bit. Tell us a little bit about just some of the practical things that you had to do here. We've talked about, and we'll add some pictures, however we manage to publish this. We'll add some pictures of your sanctuary, the entryway behind us and to your right, actually. But you've done a lot of remodeling. You obviously didn't do this just the two of you in that regard. So how has a church come around you? Even while we were in here just getting ready to do this, someone by the name of Ken, I think, popped in. And so talk to us about that, because I think that would be one thing to, someone who's got a passion for rural ministry, but maybe they've hardly ever picked up a hammer in their whole life. And so, what's that all about?
I think, again, it's about relationships. Because, and we worked a lot in the first stages of this, 5 years ago. The church was pretty small, and so we were here almost every day, swinging hammers and scraping flooring, and we put our kids to work, and but we gave them room and board. So
you gave them what?
Room and board.
The kids?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's nice. Yeah.
Good.
And we did. We had some people from the church who were here every day, and so some of it was slow. But then we networked. We used the relationships, and there was teams. There was a team that came from the church in Minnesota for a week or two and helped us. There was a team from Great Falls that came. There were people who came from different places and helped us get things going. And just, don't use people, but use those connections, to see what doors God might open to help partner together in ministry.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you actually have unbelievers coming in here and swinging a hammer with y'all?
Yeah, we have.
We just did when we put up this beam just the other week, and there was somebody, Mark works with driving bus, who...
That blonde beam kind of behind you way back there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, one of the bus drivers.
Who's never been to church here.
Yeah, he keeps asking me what time our mass is, but he's never showed up yet, so...
Someday.
Yeah, someday. And so don't be afraid of people coming in and cussing like a sailor, know. And actually that same day there was a bunch of the ranch hands. One of our guys who manages a large ranch outside of town he knew that we needed some extra help, and actually he's done that a couple of days where he tells his ranch hands, all right, you guys are working at the church today.
Wow.
And 2 weeks ago we did have a maps team from Idaho come and help us with and we have a large maps team planning to come from Georgia in July to help finish some of the upstairs projects. So
wow.
And also along with that, I would just say, obviously, someone who's called to rural, I think it's a huge step of faith and trust. So not being afraid of those relational connections, like he was saying, before we left Minnesota, our biggest prayer probably was, Lord, make this an orchestration.
Not a solo.
Not a solo.
Yeah.
Because we only knew that we were being called, and we didn't know that anybody was going to come with us to join us on a team. But what's crazy is as we stepped out alone, the Lord brought this person in from Alaska, said, we feel like we're supposed to help you be here as a part of helping the church. And this person from over here says, we feel called to be here and help. And so the Lord has orchestrated. We didn't go out and find a team, but the Lord orchestrated for us.
And he continues to do that. That couple from Alaska, they moved here because they felt like they were supposed to be a part of helping this church get going.
Yeah.
We're only a few months old as a church when we met them. We had another couple that just moved out to Cascade from Great Falls last year, and we'd been in relationship with them. They'd come to the church off and on, and they decided to buy a house out here and move out here just to be a part of the church. And it's funny how God works all those things, because he's a retired structural engineer who's still licensed, and so it's been an amazing blessing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Something we never, if we were trying to handpick a team, we never could have orchestrated what God has orchestrated.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Wow, that's good. Trinity's impact on your lives. Here's your chance to just do a plug for Trinity, if you will, Trinity Bible College and Graduate School. How did TBC back then, now it's TBC and GS, your graduates in 2002, Jessica 2005, right,
Yep.
Mark? How did that prepare you? What's the impact of Trinity on your life?
I think, educationally it sets you on a trajectory of, because obviously you can't learn everything you need to know for ministry in the 4 years or however long you end up being there. But it kind of puts you on a trajectory, and sometimes I wish I could go back and take all that stuff back in, because especially when you're 19 years old, some of it kind of goes in and out. But but I think it puts you on a trajectory educationally, knowing how to learn and things. But really, the biggest teacher, I think, is the doing. And I appreciate what you guys are doing with the pack your bags and the go, and is that what it's called?
Go trips.
Yeah. Okay. And a huge thing, again, I've been using this word over and over again, but is relationships. Some of the people, some of my closest friends today are people I met at Trinity in ministry. And actually our closest friends, who are also pastors here in this state, are our closest friends. We went with them and stuff. And I met them. She didn't know them at Trinity, but I did. And we got reconnected about 5 years ago, and now they're our closest friends. And then another guy that I was on the same floor with, and we've stayed connected. And we were both here in Montana for a while. And then he went back to Minnesota, so it's kind of like we swapped. But just those relationships is huge. And obviously, this relationship.
Come on.
Best thing about Trinity,
Come on.
I received, is right here.
Right.
So.
I have kind of a different outlook on Trinity because of seeing Ellendale from all sides, as, because I actually, the place I have lived longest in my life is Ellendale, North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
Because I
Okay.
spent 4 years there as with my parents, 4 years there as a student, and then 2 years working there. So I've spent 10 years total in Ellendale, and I have an incredible love for the place. See, I didn't grow up in Great Falls in a big town. I grew up in a town of 1900 in Minnesota. So, most Minnesota people, North Central would be I was like, get me away from the big city. It wasn't, different people are called to different things, and rural was my heartbeat. And for me personally, incredible altar moments and times with the Lord, where he just solidifies calls. I'm also thankful for the church leadership that spoke into my life when we were at Trinity. Both people we worked for and teachers. And not only that, I remember district superintendents who were on the board at Trinity coming and speaking into my life personally when they saw something that the Holy Spirit was doing in my life, and they came and spoke a word of encouragement to me that I've carried with me this whole time.
That's good.
Those are invaluable.
Also, just thinking about it too, for me, is learning how to lead, which I never saw myself as a leader.
Wow.
But I think even people at Trinity, like Dr. Bennett, he wasn't doctor back then, but Brother Bennett, as we knew him as, saw that in me, and as a sophomore put me in charge of leading a traveling worship team. And so, like, learning how to lead, learning how to use those God-given things and step up, that's been big in my life. And like I said, church planting was never on our radar. I didn't want to be a senior pastor. We never saw ourselves as entrepreneurs. But obviously God had put those things in there. And then, so even having those things worked and tended even while we were at Trinity, I think probably see some of the benefits now of that.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing your hearts with us, your story. I'm not sure how we're going to use this, but we want to tell it. This is the sort of thing I think this would jazz up, jazz a lot of our especially those students that feel called to rural ministry, to pastoring in the rural context.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.